Hello, my name's Tom Walker. Welcome to That'll Be the Day. In this podcast, I'm going to be talking to three women who have very strong views on e-scooters. They tell me in no uncertain terms what they think needs to be done and why their public awareness campaign has been so successful. But before we hear from them, if you like the music at the start of this podcast, it's from a track called That'll Be the Day by the Liverpool band The Vow. And as always, we'll be hearing a track by The Vow at the end of this podcast. Now, I first became aware of e-scooters towards the end of last year when a trial of the electric vehicles was launched in Liverpool. It wasn't long before the city centre was flooded by mainly young people zigzagging on e-scooters along the roads and pavements. They were becoming a menace to pedestrians, and it wasn't just visually impaired people like me who were complaining. Drivers were also getting angry, telling me that e-scooter riders were ignoring the rules of the road. Visually impaired members of the National Federation of the Blind were also becoming concerned as e-scooter trials began in other towns and cities including Nottingham, Milton Keynes, Middlesbrough and London. Since then, the Federation has launched a highly successful public awareness campaign, which has resulted in their members appearing in newspaper articles and on countless national, regional and local television news programmes. So how have they achieved that? Well, joining me on That'll Be the Day are Sarah Gayton and Sarah Ledbetter, who are campaigners from the National Federation of the Blind, and Rachel Pereira from Nottingham, who was nearly mown down by an e-scooter in the city centre. I started by asking Rachel to tell me what happened.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the first encounter I had with e-scooters was just awful. I was basically walking along a road in the city centre, quite happily minding my own business, walking to my bus stop from work with my long cane out, and this guy comes on his e-scooter, whooshes straight past me, comes really, really close to me. And I got really, really panicky, and he almost hit me. And if I'd have gone 1 inch in the wrong direction, then I could have been quite injured by him. And a passerby had to say, "Oh, it's an e-scooter," because I was quite panicky because I actually thought that I'd stepped into the road. And so I felt really disorientated by what had happened.
Same thing happened to me, Rachel. I don't know whether you heard a couple of the interviews I gave, but exactly the same thing happened. And it was a passerby who explained just how close to being mown down I'd become. Sounds like it was exactly the same for you.
Yeah, it does sound like we've had exactly the same experience.
Was the passerby was almost traumatized by what happened to you? Because the woman who witnessed my incident seemed quite anxious about it.
Yeah, so did the person who helped me. They were really anxious that I was okay, but they're also really very concerned about what had happened and the fact that somebody had just been going. It seemed very fast to me on the pavement at the time.
What do you think needs to be done about e-scooters, Rachel?
For me personally, I want them to be banned because they are very dangerous. I mean, I know that there's a lot that has come in to do with these scooters and the safety and for them being policed, but actually in reality, that's not happening right now. People are being fined for using them improperly, but I don't think that that's happening very often, or certainly not to my experience. And I'm in the city centre an awful lot, and I don't think it's happening at all.
Have they kept you out of Nottingham city centre, or are you still having to commute to work and go through the city centre for other reasons?
Yeah, because I work in the city centre, and it's really made me think about the routes that I take, and I've had to reevaluate the way that I go to work from the bus stop and think, okay, well, maybe if I take this road, it's quieter. There might not be so many scooters up there. I might not have a problem up there, and probably half of the time it is the case, and then half of the time that there is a problem. But it certainly makes me feel really, really frightened. I've just been matched to a new guide dog, and we're starting our training on Monday this coming week, and I feel quite anxious even for my dog, because I don't want to have any encounters where my dog gets injured as well, because I've waited a long time for a new guide dog, but with COVID and the long waiting list and things. And, I don't want my dog to be out of action or even worse because of an encounter with a scooter.
Entirely understandable. And one person who will understand your experience very well is actually joining us from a train in Leicester train station. That's Sarah Ledbetter, and Sarah is a campaigner with the National Federation of the Blind. Sarah, what's your experience of e-scooters been?
Well, we don't actually have any of the trials in Leicester and Leicestershire, but we still have the illegal ones. So they come all out of the place, and they're very quiet, and they're near to the train station, and they just come all out of the place, and you just don't know they're there because it's such a quiet vehicle. But I've been helping to campaign to help others, because it's not really that bad, but the trials, but it's bad enough for the illegal ones, which shouldn't be allowed to be sold and be on the pavements. Really, it's that not knowing they're on the pavements and tripping over them, like anything else that goes on the pavement that shouldn't be there.
Now, you've been involved with the National Federation of the Blind in the campaign against e-scooters, and I've helped, I hope, in a small way. What are blind people telling you their concerns are in relation to e-scooters?
People are saying that they don't want to go out, and they think it's a minefield, and they're so on the floor, and I'm trying to go around them, and they don't know they're there, and they get tripping over and getting injured. They just don't want to go out. They don't feel confident to go out because of e-scooters being all over the place, being driven at them on the pavement, or being left all over the place. They just want to stay at home when they should have the right to go out and about and be independent as they possibly can, but they can't be with e-scooters.
Now, Sarah Gayton, also from the National Federation of the Blind, has been heavily involved in coordinating the campaign. How do you think the campaign's gone so far, Sarah?
Well, we've actually got the concerns out there into the media that was critically important. And I think the reason for that is because I've been allowed to actually go to a lot of the trial areas and repeatedly go back and back and back and film the reality, like what Rachel said, the reality is what is happening on the streets and on the pavements. And that is showing that there is a serious problem out there of riders riding on pavements, riding at people. I've seen people being literally pulled out of the way of people riding double on an e-scooter in Birmingham. I've witnessed them ride at people at controlled pedestrian crossings, and they're jumping out of the way. And we know, like our members, they don't know which way to go, left or right, even if they're coming at them. So, we've used the power of visual media to show the media what that problem is, and they are as mortified. I know they have to be non-judgmental, but I think they personally are mortified to what they're witnessing. It's chaos, it's confusion out there, and it's simply downright dangerous. And these trials, Tom, they have to be brought to a halt, and the illegal ones, they have to basically be stopped. The shops have to stop selling them, because again, they're just riding everywhere in that urban environment, and that is not safe.
Now, you've been doing a lot of filming, Sarah, I know, and you just mentioned that. What's the craziest thing you've seen? What's the craziest thing you've actually filmed?
Well, there was a young lad in Birmingham. He was on the pavement. He was there with his adults. I don't know if that were like the parents or whatever, but he literally, he wasn't really moving very fast. He turned the e-scooter, he skidded it round, and that would have come up to my waistline, right in front of a pedestrian who actually jumped backwards, Tom. Absolutely jumped backwards. Otherwise, she would have been seriously hurt. I've also seen on 2 occasions people jumping onto e-scooters and then completely losing control of them. So their legs get flappy. They sort of flap either side of the e-scooter where they put your foot on. And one was heading towards a shop window, and one was heading to a moving bus, and they had no control over it. Absolutely crazy scenes, Tom.
I'm not saying this because I've been involved in the campaign, but I think it's a statement of fact. You really have been highly successful, you and Sarah Ledbetter in particular, in bringing this to the public's attention. The campaign has been phenomenal, really. What I want you to do, Sarah, is reflect on why you think the campaign has worked.
It's because we've actually really, truly and honestly engaged with the media and actually given them the reality, Tom. It's actually showing what is happening on the ground, how they've been ridden, how they've been left everywhere, and showing the reality of it and giving those voices of blind people that have got in contact, you know, giving them a voice, giving them an opportunity to tell the media their story, you know. And I think the actual media organisations in those places, they can see for themselves, Tom, what is going on. So we tell them, they know it's going on, and then they give a platform for us to discuss it. This decision, or this decision that the government's got to make about do we legalise them or not, it's a once in a lifetime change on the highway, and it's not for the better. So we have to give them that evidence. We have to give them the stories of people being affected. We have to keep telling them of the people that keep on being killed on the illegal scooters across the country. I think there's either 7 or 8 people now passed away in about the same number of weeks in the UK from being involved in an illegal e-scooter. The serious injuries that are happening, Tom, to people riding them as well, you know, because our campaign, it just doesn't look at the impact on blind and visually impaired people. It actually looks at the whole thing. It looks at the safety, the instability of the e-scooter. It looks at the impact on elderly people. It looks at the impact on mothers and children, you know, trying to use that pavement, and the safety of riders and the safety of other people. So if we solely focused just on blind and visually impaired people, we wouldn't have got as far as we did. But we know that this is not a safe or sensible form of mobility for anybody.
What's the future for the campaign? How do you envisage it developing?
Well, we are looking at actually going back to number 10 again. I know we've been once before, but we have to sometime in the autumn spotlight this issue again, back to the MPs, back to the politicians, back to the House of Lords, and say, look, so this is still not working. You know, we've got ministers that are turning their heads away from the problems. Also, I am starting to look for a venue in London where we can actually show, bring all of that film footage together and the stories together, and actually give the MPs opportunities to come and watch it and ask questions. So, you know, if you want to come, Tom, you're more than welcome. That is starting to be planned now. One thing that really gutted me that I found out only a few days ago is when we were in London, Tom, petitioning quarter of an hour before we banged that door at number 10, or you banged that door, is that the Minister for Transport actually, with an MP from Milton Keynes, put out a whole PR spin of how good e-scooters were in Milton Keynes.
And Sarah Ledbetter, how did you feel about that?
I think it's terrible that they're not wanting to get involved, and they're not wanting to find out that how e-scooters are really affecting people, how the people are being injured, how it's affecting their lives and their confidence and self-esteem. And they're not wanting to go out because of something that's not stable, that's not got any noise on, that's like riding at them or behind them, and it's stopping them from wanting to go out. These things, illegal ones, shouldn't be sold in the shops, and the trials aren't working because they're not environmentally friendly.
Sarah Gayton, how important has social media been?
Oh, absolutely critical, because I've been putting the films up of what's been happening, and it had caught the attention of the BBC, National BBC. It had caught the attention of Good Morning Britain, you know, ITV. It had caught the attention of all like local BBC radio people and different newspapers as well, because they could just see the reality, and you could not ignore that. You couldn't ignore it. So actually, you know, it doesn't matter if on social media, if only a few people actually see that tweet, if it's the right people and you put it to those right people, that can then generate an interest from a journalist that can go out and actually further investigate it. So it is vital.
There are other organisations in the visual impairment sector. Do you think they need to maybe look and learn at the success you've had with the e-scooter campaign? And if so, what do they need to take away from it?
They keep saying that they're working with the government. Actually, they should be working for blind and visually impaired people. And anybody can see that those e-scooters are not safe, how they've been ridden, maintained, and used in the urban environment. You know, so they should really take a step backwards, really look at the evidence they're getting, the evidence that I'm providing on Twitter and stuff like that, and change what they're doing. If these are allowed to become legalized, And we've seen the problems already with a tiny amount of these e-scooters, but in very concentrated areas in cities and towns. And with the illegal ones, if they are made totally legal, anybody can get their hands on these. And you will kiss goodbye to that pavement, Tom, now and forever, because they're unregulatable. The police have got enough to do. They can't even regulate the legal trials, and they can't even regulate the illegal ones out there at the moment.
But the government say, and local authorities say, that they are environmental. They're another way for people to travel around a city quickly and very cleanly. Do we, as visually impaired people, maybe we just have to put up with them, Sarah? What do you say to that?
Absolutely not, because, you know, there's other forms of active transport. There's people want to walk, people want to ride bikes, you know, but if you allow these e-scooters to become legal, they will take that pavement space away from you. They will not stop on the roads. You know, they'll be jumping in and out and over controlled crossings. They'll be literally in your space. So we cannot allow this to happen. There are other arguments, Tom, about this environmental side. You know, there's other arguments about where they're getting all the materials to make the batteries, and also the actual, for the legal ones, the consumables, because lots of bits keep breaking off these e-scooters, you know. I mean, I went to Rochdale the other day and I looked at 11 e-scooters, 7 had broken left-hand brakes. So that even the legal ones, you know, 50% of those 7, the brakes weren't even working, half, like the left-hand brake.
Rachel, we as visually impaired people have to put up with loads of obstacles in the streets already, A-boards, cyclists on the pavements. Isn't it maybe the case that we just also have to accept that e-scooters are just part of our environment these days? How do you feel about that?
I feel it's absolute codswallop. To be honest with you, the road is where vehicles go, and the pavements are where pedestrians go. And this is how it should be. This is a world where if we can't feel safe on the pavement, then we're going to be more and more trapped, and you are going to find more people becoming more frightened, more housebound, more isolated, because they are too scared to go out in case they get hit by an e-scooter. It's not acceptable that the government should say, oh yeah, this is working in Milton Keynes. I've lived in Milton Keynes, Tom, and I know that they've got a lot of redways and cycleways where it would work perfectly to, you know, ride an e-scooter away from the road, away from the pavement. So yeah, of course it works in Milton Keynes, but it doesn't work in Nottingham. It certainly does not work in the city. It doesn't work in Birmingham. It doesn't work in other places where they've got trials, because they haven't got safe enough places to ride them. So no, I don't think it is going to be just one thing that we're going to have to accept. Absolutely not. I've been campaigning since last year, and I too would like to see, you know, the bigger charities do something a little bit more about it, because, you know, since I've been done a few articles, appeared on some news, I still don't feel like enough has been done by the bigger charities.
If perchance there's somebody important listening to this, a politician, a decision maker, what would you say to him or her, Rachel?
I would say that if it was you or your, I don't know, registered blind grandma who wanted to go out and you couldn't see, or they can't see, how are you going to feel? How are you going to feel if that person who is you, your child, your old grandma, your great grandma, how would you feel if you haven't done anything and they become injured? You would feel like rubbish. And I want you to know that if someone really important is listening to this, then something needs to be done right now, because people have died as a result of these e-scooters. So do something now before it becomes a major, major problem.
Well, thanks very much to the two Sarahs, Gayton and Ledbetter, and to Rachel Pereira for her personal stories as well. Ladies, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so which vow track have I chosen to end this podcast with? Well, I'm not going to lie. There's no connection whatsoever between Julia and the e-scooters. It's just that Julia's a great track.
A splash of sunlight in a skyscape of grey. Temptation took me when you looked my way. I don't believe I'll be the same again since you, Julia, since you wrote I love you, but they won't let us be. Though in our thought crimes we are almost free. I wanted somebody who feels like me, and it's you, Julia, it's you. Melancholy plunges my face into the slurry. Everyone knows we'll get our share of pain. Love is the finest gift that we're given, so cherish the feeling of deliverance. Everyone knows we'll get our share of pain. A splash of sunlight in a skyscape of grey. Temptation took me when you looked my